Hi, it's Callum. So this is another biopsy of endometrium, and this is quite different in appearance, and that's because this is secretory phase endometrium. So at low power, if we look at the low power architecture, this is different from the previous video in which we looked at in proliferative endometrium, which had small round glands. We're all round in pretty much the same shape and size, whereas these are quite different, aren't they? So quite almost irregular looking, dilated glands with quite a tortuous look, almost like the wiggly look to them here. And you can see they're also dilated. You can see the spaces within the glands too here. So let's look at higher power. Let's look a bit more closely at these. Yeah. So you can see here within the glands, there's material that's been secreted into the lumen. If we look around, we can see we've got a completely different architecture. These glands are dilated and like wiggly looking and irregular. And also, there aren't the mitotic figures. If we look closely, you can't see any mitotic figures, as you would expect to see in the proliferative phase. So we've got irregular, tortuous glands with secretions in the lumen, no mitotic figures. And then if we look at the cells themselves, we can see within the cells, there are these white spaces within the cytoplasm. These white spaces within the cytoplasm contain glycogen, because these cells are making glycogen and secreting them into the lumen, and we can see this. You can see the secretions within the lumen. Now, depending on this, so we know that at this point that this is secretory phase endometrium, so that's the second half of the ovulatory cycle, about day 14, 14 to 28. Within the secretory phase, you can make some estimation of whether we're looking at early secretory or late secretory. Early secretory phase will have subnuclear vacuoles. That is to say that these white vacuoles containing glycogen are underneath the nucleus, between the nucleus and the basement membrane. And I think that's really what we've got here for the most part. Some of them are above, like occasionally here and here. So maybe we're at the end of the early secretory or mid-secretory, but for the most part, they're subnuclear. So this is subnuclear vacuolation. And when you see that, you can reasonably confidently call this early secretory phase endometrium, or you can just not bother and call it secretory. Both are correct. Within late secretory, the vacuoles tend to be above the nucleus. The glands can look more tortuous, more ragged. Although that's a bit of a different, difficult, a more difficult thing to call, to estimate. So I would, in my practice, to be honest, I've just said, if they're subnuclear vacuolation, I would call it early secretory, and if the vacuoles are the luminal aspect, I would call it late secretory, or I'd just not bother and call it secretory. But that's really all there is to say about secretory phase endometrium, to be honest. There it is, all looks the same. And to finish off this trio of videos, we're going to talk about the final phase, which is the shedding or menstrual phase. Okay, great. Speak to you soon.